Hi, it's Steve. In this video, we'll talk about the main reasons why your top-load washer won't fill. We'll identify the components used in the fill cycle, where they are located, and how to test them. Now, first of all, we'll explain the typical fill circuit on a top-load washer. There are several components involved, including the water level selector, the water temperature switch, the timer, as well as the inlet water valve and the lid switch. So the first thing we'll want to do is to verify that we do have adequate water pressure. Pull your washer forward. First of all, verify that you do have both water taps turned on. Then next we'll look at the inlet screens to your water valve. So turn the water supply off, remove the fill hoses from the back of the washer, and verify that the screens are not plugged. There'll be two inlets to the valve, a hot and a cold, as well as at least two solenoids that operate those inlet valves. If either of those solenoids has failed, it won't allow water into the valve and therefore not allow that water into your tub. Typically, you would only see one side of that valve fail, so you may have hot water available but not cold, or vice versa. If you typically use only a cold water wash and the cold water valve portion had failed, then you would get a no fill situation. The solenoids can be tested for continuity using a multimeter. To check continuity, we'll simply place our meter leads across each terminal, and you should see a reading on your meter somewhere between 400 and 1,000 ohms. If the meter shows overscale or open circuit, you would have a defective solenoid. So check both of them. You should have similar readings, and we verify that those solenoids are working properly. Now, the lid switch on a top-load washer is used to supply power to several components in the washer. If the switch fails, you may not get power to some of those components, and the washer may not fill, may not agitate, or it may not spin or drain. We can test that lid switch using a multimeter. We simply need to disconnect the leads that are attached to the switch. Now, to test the switch, we're just going to raise that lid to deactivate the switch. We'll insert our meter leads onto the terminals, and as we close that lid, we should see continuity show up on that meter. With the reading close to zero, we can assume that that lid switch is working properly. Now, another major component involved in the fill circuit of a top-load washer is the water level control, or pressure switch. How the switch operates is it senses the water level in the tub based on the pressure through a rubber hose that attaches to a switch which uses a diaphragm to actuate. There typically will be several settings from low, medium, high, and extra high. It also may have a rotary dial type of selector. And what this switch does is it typically will supply power to the inlet fill valve when the tub is empty. Now, to demonstrate the operation of a typical water level control or pressure switch, we've attached an air dome tube, such as you would find on the washer, to the diaphragm side of the switch. We then would attach our meter leads to the appropriate terminals on that switch, and we show that we do have continuity. Verify that that is the same through all settings on the switch. Now, in a typical situation, what would happen is water enters that tub, pressure will build in that tube and cause that switch to go open. We're just simulating a water level rise in the tub, causing that switch to go open circuit. If for some reason those contacts stay open in that pressure switch, the washer will not fill because the water valve will not receive power. So that would be the next thing to check, and we can easily test that with a multimeter, checking for continuity between the terminals. Now, to test the typical pressure or water level switch on your top-load washer, we would disconnect the wire harness to the terminals, and then using your wiring diagram, we'll identify which of the terminals are the normally closed circuit for the fill valve. Once we've identified which of the terminals to do our continuity test, we'll attach one meter lead to one of them and the opposite meter lead to the other. And we're looking for a 0 ohm or continuity reading on our meter. If it showed open circuit, it would indicate that the water level control or pressure switch is defective. Now, another component that is involved in the fill circuit on your top load washer is the temperature selector switch. Most top load washers will offer a choice for your wash cycle from cold through warm to hot, and typically all rinses would be cold. The temperature selector switch is part of that circuit to the water fill valve, and as such, if there was a defect in the switch, power may not get to the valve, and therefore you may not get a water fill. You can test the water temperature switch using a multimeter, checking for continuity between particular terminals on the switch. You will, however, need the wiring diagram for your model and also be able to understand that wiring diagram and to know which terminals to check. If your temperature switch is defective, you will need to replace it. Although not as common, another component that may cause a no-fill condition on a top-load washer is the timer itself. Contacts internally in that timer are part of the circuit that is used to supply power through the water level control, temperature switch, and on to the actual fill valve. If those contacts were open inside of the timer, you would not get power to the fill valve. To test those contacts, you would need a multimeter, as well as the wiring diagram for your particular model, and also the ability to interpret that diagram to know which contacts to test on your timer. If the timer is defective, you will need to replace it. Now, if your top load washer is an electronic control model, that could also cause a no-fill condition. First of all, verify that all of the other components are working normally, such as the lid switch, the water inlet valve, the temperature selector switch, and the pressure or water level switch. Verify that those are all working normally and all wire harnesses are correct. If all of that checks out, you may have a problem with the electronic control board and it will need to be replaced. Thank you so much for watching this video. We certainly hope it was helpful. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing.